Uh, you have seen the introduction to the Green Building Week 2023 with the theme of building the transition, the introduction to that previously. So in my webinar, I have also selected a topic which is related to the theme of the Green Building Week, that is building the transition towards sustainable built environment. This is the overview of the presentation. I will start from the environmental impacts of buildings and construction, then the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, and post-pandemic status of building and construction. Then with that basic background of building and construction and environmental impacts, we will be talking about why a transition is needed. Now we are talking about a transition, so why is it needed? Then what is the sustainable built environment, and how sustainable built environment relates with SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Then we will go to the World Green Building Week 2023 with the theme of building the transition. And there are three components in the building the transition theme: the energy transition, the regenerative transition, and the just transition. So I hope you all can see the presentation and you can hear me clearly. When we consider building and construction, building and construction industry is one of the industries which has the highest environmental impacts considering all industries. Its built environment is globally responsible for 30% of energy consumption, and then 38% of energy-related carbon emissions, 50% of extracted materials as raw materials to the construction industry, then 33% of water consumption, 35% of generated waste, and also the total footprint of the built environment is expected to double in 2060. So you can see why built environment is critical in reducing environmental impacts. This is also, it is expected that by 2050, global population will increase 27% to 9.8 billion. And with this, by 2060, global building floor area is expected to double. That is a very huge amount and huge increase. So in order to grow this expected population growth as well as the expected building floor area, the built environment specially needs to take significant effects to minimize environmental impacts. And this raise all environmental, social, and economic impacts with built environment. So what is the With these sort of significant impacts, it is critical that built environment play its part in delivering the transformation required. As I hope most of you know, Sri Lanka is a part to Paris Agreement, and as part of the Paris Agreement, built environment has also a role to play. It was identified, and our target is to become the total built environment set and construction sector must become net zero carbon by 2050. Whole built environmental sector must become net zero carbon by 2050, and all new buildings developed from 2030 is targeted to be net zero carbon. So that is a very ambitious goal. In order to reach that goal, we have to take a number of actions. So, and during amidst this environmental impacts of building and construction sector, the global construction sector faced the challenge of COVID-19, and it has some significant effects for the built environment and construction sector. For example, as I hope you know, the global pandemic triggered the largest annual reduction in global CO2 emissions in 2020. The global CO2 emissions reduced 6% from their 2019 peak. That is a huge amount. And also the second effect, the pandemic highlighted the importance of buildings on health and well-being, because a pandemic like COVID-19 is directly related to your living environment, how we use buildings and space. So people became more aware of impact of buildings on health and well-being. Therefore, the consideration for occupant comfort increased along with energy efficiency. So now we are in the post-pandemic status. So what happens now? In 2021, when we are somewhat leaving the pandemic period, the economies have reopened. Work restarted. Production patterns have readjusted to pre-pandemic levels. Manufacturing increased. We have opened our offices physically. But still, some trends from the pandemic state area, that is like hybrid working, remained. So, in our lifestyle, some new trends have included, as well as we rebounded back to the pre-pandemic levels. Therefore, When we talk about decarbonization of built environment, these measures will need to take these aspects into account. As you can see, in 2020, in 2021, building energy demand increased significantly from the previous year. And it has shown the largest increase in the last decade, that is the post-pandemic situation. Although there was slight reduction of building energy demand during the pandemic era, as the economies have reopened, again, energy demand, global energy demand has increased. And it is the largest increase in the last decade. As you can see here, this is the in the decade, the long increase can be seen in the energy demand. And the contribution of buildings and construction is significant, about 34%, from residential and non-residential buildings, as well as manufacturing of building materials such as concrete, aluminium, steel, which are highly energy intensive. So our contribution to total energy demand is such significant value, and it shows us that the buildings has the high challenge of reducing this energy demand in future. Then if you go to CO2 emissions, although CO2 emissions significantly reduced during the pandemic period, again, it has increased about 5% from 2020. And that is 2% higher from the previous peak in 2019. So again, it's a significant increase. And also the contribution of building and construction to CO2 emissions is 37%, a very significant and high value. That contributes to direct and indirect residential and non-residential carbon emission, as well as carbon emission from manufacturing of building materials. So you can see in the present scenario, building industry contribute to high percentage of global energy demand, as well as high percentage of CO2 emissions. So what will happen in future? So it is evident that decarbonization of the building stock is not going exactly as planned. We are not on track to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. We have the building industry, global building industry has a definite goal. We have to be net zero carbon by 2050, and all are to be net zero carbon by 2030. But in the present scenario, it is seen that we are not on track towards achieving that goal. The rebounding of CO2 emissions from the pandemic period shows that there are few structural changes have yet occurred within the building sector. It looks like there are no much significant structural changes in the built environment to reduce carbon emissions or to reduce the energy demand. Although in 2020, carbon emission has reduced, it seems like it is merely a pandemic-related outlier, not a continuing trend. It seems like it is a pandemic-related outlier because our normal life patterns have changed during the pandemic and the manufacturing is reduced. CO2 emissions also reduced. But that does not mean that will be a continuing trend. It was identified that to be aligned with reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050, the current emissions need to fall by 98% from 2020. So you can see this shows the Global Building Climate Tracker. It updates and tracks the progress towards building decarbonization. You can see in the left-hand side, you can see our goal is to totally decarbonize the building sector in 2050. So that is our final target. 2050, the climate tracker index is set to be 100. So in order to achieve this target, are we in the correct track? You can see in this line shows, light blue line shows our actual decarbonization effort. And this broken line shows our target. So if we consider 2021, we are in the index value 8.1, but we need to achieve about 17. So there is a significant gap between what we have achieved and what we target. So it is clearly seen that we are not going towards our expected goal. We are going somewhat outside the expected area. Although in 2020, decarbonization has improved, that seems like it's a pandemic outlier and not a true value according to the trend. So most probably you can see, although 2020 it's higher value, it has again fallen to lesser decarbonization value. So we are far from our targeted value in 2021. And these data are in 2021, but I expect in 2022 and in future 2023, it may go in a similar pattern. So that shows that we have to take drastic efforts to increase our efforts of decarbonization of building sector. So still we can see the structural changes we have targeted for. There are the structural changes in the building sector is still slow. We have not achieved significant structural changes, long-term structural changes. That's why we need to accelerate our actions towards decarbonization. These actions that support dramatic emission reductions have not been realized significantly due to post-pandemic period of health, economic and energy crisis. In order to go towards our expected decarbonization goal, we need concrete structural changes in the building sector. But still, as we are facing a lot of challenges, not globally as well as in Sri Lanka, we face a lot of challenges in the post-pandemic period, health, economic and energy crisis. So it seems that during this period, the structural changes taken in the building sector are not sufficient to go towards our decarbonization goal. So why is a transition needed? The built environment must undergo a transition to ensure better outcomes for nature and people. Rather than going along the path we are currently taking, we have to think about a transition to achieve our future targets. So this transition requires systematic transformation across the building and construction sector. So an urgent understanding of what the transition involves and a strong shift in how all stakeholders think and act is vital to secure a sustainable built environment. As the built environment, as the people involved in the built environment, we need to understand what is the transition requires. And also we need a strong shift in stakeholders, how they think and act in order to secure a sustainable built environment. So here we comes to the theme of my presentation, that is building the transition towards a sustainable built environment. So what is sustainable built environment? It protects and enhances people, places and natural environment, and critical in reducing GHG emissions and tackling climate crisis. And also, to be sustainable, environmental priorities should be balanced with socio-economic development, including economic growth, human health, and equity. Sustainability has three aspects: social, economic, and environmental. So integration of these three is necessary to build a sustainable built environment. And also it requires a holistic approach to sustainable development, and also we have to apply our measures throughout the entire building life cycle. Considering one building life cycle stage and considering the actions for a sustainable built environment is not sufficient. We have to think about building life cycle and then identify appropriate measures for achieving sustainability of the built environment. Achieving sustainable built environment is not a new concept. For decades, we are trying for a sustainable built environment, and in some aspects we have succeeded, and in some aspects we have to improve. So, World Green Building Council has identified 3 impact areas for sustainable built environment: climate action, then health and well-being, and resources and circularity. So, these impact areas are interrelated with sustainable development goals identified by the United Nations. We have to go, the sustainable development goals are general, but we can identify where built environment fits in, where we relate to sustainable development goals in achieving a sustainable built environment. So, from sustainable built environment and sustainable development goals, there are, as you know, there are 17 sustainable development goals. From these, 11 SDGs are directly related to built environment. Good health and well. Then clean water and sanitation. SDG 7, affordable and clean energy. Then decent work and economic growth. Industry, innovation and infrastructure. Then reduced inequalities. SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. 12, responsible consumption and production. Then 13, climate action. 15, life on land. And finally, 17, partnerships for the goals. So, when we consider sustainable built environment and the transition needed for sustainable built environment, we can integrate it with sustainable development goals to identify appropriate measures to go towards a sustainable built environment. So these are the 11 SDGs which are directly related to sustainable built environment. So this year's Green Building Week's theme, Building the Transition, calls on the global building and construction sector to accelerate transition to secure, energy efficient, regenerative and just future for all. These are the 3 themes of building the transition: energy efficiency, regenerative and just future for all. These 3 themes highlight how built environment can support Paris Agreement and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Transition in the three forms: the energy transition, regenerative transition, and just transition. So, simply, energy transition starts with energy we don't use, extra energy. In energy transition, we are not only thinking about switching to renewable energy. Transition is more than that. A transition requires a complete systemic change, which will include accelerating actions to reduce energy demand, produce more energy than a building can use, then store energy and share clean energy. Switching to renewable energy is one part, but it's more a systemic change is required for the transmission. And also investment in clean technologies. And with increased investment in clean technologies, achieving economies of scale. And also, existing buildings are also very important. Deep retrofitting of existing buildings to be exceptionally energy efficient. In existing buildings, we cannot start with energy efficiency measures, but we can think about how to retrofit, how to renovate, how to refurbish established existing buildings in order to achieve energy efficiency. So that's energy transition. So in order to achieve the energy transition, 4 SDGs are directly relevant. Affordable and clean energy, then industry, innovation and infrastructure, climate action, and partnerships for the goal. Actually, this last one, SDG 17, is common to all 3 transitions. True transition, partnerships for the goals is a must. So if we consider the 7th SDG, 34% of global energy is consumed by buildings. Therefore, the actions we can take to reduce this energy consumption and also to increase the efficiency of energy use and to go towards a low carbon or zero carbon energy sources are important in achieving sustainability goals towards affordable and clean energy. Then industry, innovation and 75% of infrastructure that will be needed by 2050 is yet to be built. When we go towards the 2050 target, we have to go towards very high amount of infrastructure and buildings that will be required in future. So, in sustainable cities, they will provide equitable and high quality infrastructure that promotes economic development as well as so increase the social. The energy related CO2 emissions are currently reaching a record high. Then climate action. As pointed out earlier, 37% of global energy-related emissions comes from buildings and construction. Therefore, we can accelerate the sustainable nature of buildings by supporting efficient use of clean energy and improving resilience and adaptation to climate impacts. Then the regenerative transition begins with materials we reuse. Materials and other resources we reuse, and that focuses on the regenerative transmission. So what is the regenerative transmission? How can we apply regenerative principles in the built environment? So our planet and our planet's resources give us life, but they are not infinite. They are limited. So humans and built environment must exist together within a cycle of natural systems. We have to protect biodiversity and also prioritize its restoration, and we have to go towards nature-based solutions in building construction and creating a circular economy across entire building value chain. Now, the built environment is going from linear economy to circular economy, and we are focusing on reducing, reusing, and recycling resources. So, regenerative transition, it's about protecting and reusing our limited resources towards achieving a sustainable built environment. So regenerative transition is related to 4 SDGs. Decent work and economic growth. As you know, the global workforce, from global workforce, 7% is employed in the construction industry. That's a significant percentage. So the construction of sustainable buildings and infrastructure can create jobs. Now the focus is given for green jobs. We are modifying job descriptions to be green jobs, and the workers can be reskilled. Their skilled can be improved and also upskilled. Additional skills can be added to their jobs to suit their work to a low carbon economy. Then responsible consumption and production. From the total global materials extracted globally, 50% of these materials are used by built environment. Nearly half of materials extracted from nature are being used by the built environment. So our sector can take a lot of actions to reduce this intake as well as reuse and recycle material, going towards a circular economy. It's identified that the developing countries, a person in a developing country has a 10 times material footprint than a person from a less developed country. So the building industry globally has a responsibility to balancing consumption and production patterns of the set. The building industry is directly related to land. That over the next 40 years, 230 billion square meters of new buildings will be constructed. So it's our responsibility to provide access to environment through nature-based solutions that enhance resilience and support biodiversity. Then the third transition is the just transition, which creates opportunities for all. Achieving climate justice is not enough. It has to go hand in hand with social justice. The people who have contributed leads to the environmental degradation. For example, less developed countries are suffering the biggest consequences of the climate change. So in the current situation, the equality is not same as equity. We may provide equal measures, but still that will not be enough for less advantaged communities. So we have to be equitable as well as equal. So the just transition highlights the necessity of combining climate justice with social justice, without which it will be difficult to achieve transition in long term. So in just transition, again, focuses on good health and well-being, which directly relate to built environment, as 90% of our time is spent inside buildings. So we need to enhance health by improving well-being across all stages of the building life cycle. Then clean water and sanitation. 15% of global freshwater use is from buildings and construction. So the transition should take place in order to protect scarce water resources, promote efficient water use, and enhance water quality and sanitation. We are already taking actions towards this. We are not starting these actions, but what we need is to speed up our actions, as we need a transition to go towards our environmental goals. Again, a fair distribution of clean energy is required, as it shows that less developed countries have a disadvantage in regarding affordable and clean energy. And reducing inequalities. 80% of cities worldwide still do not have affordable housing for most of their population. Therefore, sustainable buildings and transition should promote decent standards of living, from quality employment human rights for construction workers to eliminating energy poverty and ensuring affordability of resources. Sustainable cities and communities. It was estimated 82% of population added by 2030 will live in countries without mandatory building energy codes. Still, globally, we are lagging on that. Many countries do not yet have built-in energy codes that regulates and make standards of the requirements of built-in energy, which is needed for social, environmental, economic development. Then, in order to successfully to take successful actions on the partnerships for the goal is essential. That's why all three components of the transition includes and relates to last sustainable development goal, which is the partnerships for the goals. That partnership is already there. Countries are collaborating. There is Paris Agreement on climate change and other agreements and partnerships among countries, and we have to accelerate these partnerships. So the world will benefit from these partnerships and networks. We need powerful partnerships that enhance the knowledge sharing, then ambition and access across planet, people, and economies. So the correct partnerships, then funding, financing, networking is essential for successful implementation of the transition we required for the sustainable built environment. So, as we need immediate transition in built environment, this transition should take place immediately as we are expecting to go towards our net zero carbon goals. As globally as well as in Sri Lanka, we are currently taking many initiatives and actions in order to go towards that target, net zero carbon goal. But we need to accelerate our efforts in order to achieve our final goal of net zero carbon economy, both globally and locally. Thank you. These are some resources I have used for the presentation. And remember, what we build today defines our tomorrow. As sustainable development is not only about ourselves, but about our future generations also. So it is our responsibility as the built environment community to accelerate the transition so we can achieve our targets towards sustainable built environment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, madam. So if you have any questions regarding today's session, now you can unmute your mics and ask the questions. Mm, Okay, I think we can wind up the session now. Thank you very much, madam, for your informative and inspiring lecture and sharing your valuable knowledge with our audience. And as well as thank you all for being a great audience today. And give me a few minutes to inform you of upcoming events. This is our associate professional training program. So if you want to become a green accredited professional, this is first step for that. So you can register for our 45 batch, and associate professional training program starts on 23rd of September. And also this is our assessing and management of the organizational carbon footprint calculation workshop. We have to plan conduct this workshop on 13th and 14th of October. You can register before 6th of October. Thank you again, madam, and all. Stay tuned of upcoming events. Thank you all and good night.
Thank you, Dinushika. Good night.